this ability for me to come out made me understand and love myself so much more than I did, because I grew up like with these little tendencies of like, why do I want to kiss women so bad? Like, why do I want to date my best friend? Like why am I like this? The ability to come out made me understand myself. It gave me permission for the first time in my life to love myself.
I was definitely in the closet. I just didn't realize it was a closet. And a few years ago, I turned on the lights and started looking around and trying to figure out what was going on here. And I saw a sign over a door that said out, and I walked out of it and I was like, oh my God, that was a closet? All the clothes make so much more sense now. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Care So Much. Today we have an incredibly special episode. It's going to be ever so slightly different than what we usually do. So today, October 11th, is National Coming Out Day. And as a special way to announce my coming out, I brought on a wonderful guest, Sydney Smith, who is a content creator. She is sharing her story about coming out late in life as a lesbian on TikTok. She is also an entrepreneur that you can learn all about on her social media. So we are going to be talking about both of our experiences today and coming out later in life. We'll talk about what coming out means, why it's important. Before I just monologue per usual, Sydney, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why this is something you care so much about?
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. That's incredible. And I'm really excited to get to be a part of this with you. This is super, super exciting. Like she said, my name is Sydney. I came out at 25 years old after dating men my entire life. I was with a man for 5 years in a really emotionally abusive relationship. I thought I was going to marry him. I thought I was basically stuck. I had made my decision for life, and that was pretty much it. At 25 years old, I really mustered up the courage to leave, and I moved across the country. I got here, and I told my friend, I said, I think I'm going to set my Tinder settings to women and men. And she was like, why? I said, I don't know. I just feel like I want to experience things. And she's like, okay. And I went on my first date with a woman, and the rest was kind of history. So I came out, like I said, at 25 years old. I'm now 28 years old. I am engaged. I'm getting married in October 15th. So a couple days after this podcast.
That's so crazy. That's so,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk all about that experience of finding your actual person and all of those things. Another thing that I just want to mention right up top is that we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are related to our own experience and our own way that this sort of came up for us. That experience is different for all different people in the queer community, and all of those identities are super, super valid. One of the things that I think Sydney and I are both going to talk about are identities that we originally sort of thought and how we changed that realization and sort of evolved the way that we thought about our own identities. That is not to say that those identities are not valid in any way, or that anyone who does identify as ace or bi is not valid. That's super valid. We may not remember to mention that again later in the episode, but I wanted to say it just here up top. And the same thing for any members of the trans community. Trans women are women. Trans people deserve to be just as much a part of any of these communities as anybody else. And we may reference things. We'll try to remember to validate those trans identities kind of throughout, but we may reference things. And I just want to be super clear that we're very pro the trans community as well. So we're just saying that right up top here.
Love it. Yes. Perfect.
You talked about your experience kind of prior to coming out and all of those things. How do you identify now? And what was sort of that initial discovery like? You mentioned that moment of switching your Tinder settings. Was it just a whim, or was it something you'd been mulling about?
I really, even switching my Tinder settings, I didn't realize that made me gay. Like, I was like, yeah, no, everybody's open to this. And nobody really ever told me otherwise, right? Mm-hmm. So like, I didn't have anybody saying like, no, Sydney, like, I don't want to go on dates with women. Like, no, that's not normal. And I was like, okay. So when I was in that relationship, I remember thinking like very often, how am I going to die in this relationship and never get to experience women and never get to find out if specifically, like, how am I never going to get to sleep with a woman? And I think that was my specific thought process, because like society accepted it enough. Like
Mm-hmm.
women sleeping with women is like very sexualized. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
accepted, in quotes, it's
Big
accepted.
air quotes, guys.
And so I think that's where my brain was going at first, was like, well, if I just sleep with a woman, like it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And when I finally left that relationship and I moved across the country, so I grew up in Maryland and I moved all the way to Texas, I just kind of sat there and I was like, screw it. Like, why not? And so I set my Tinder settings to men and women. And my friends were just kind of like, okay, like you do you, whatever. And I was, I don't know. I didn't think that made me gay.
Mm-hmm. I think I relate a lot to that idea of like, if somebody watches your TikTok videos and if they listen to some of the things that I've said recently, they'd be like, so what do you mean you didn't know? That's wild. How could you not know that? Well, first of all, for me, so I just really came to the realization myself about like 6 months ago, like really accepted that and started to understand that. Maybe not even 6 months ago. The first friend that I told that I was like, hey, I think I'm going to date women was at the beginning of May of this year. So that was like really, really recent. I'm 28 years old. That means for the first 28 years, I was super sure that I was straight. There's a lot of things within that we can talk about, but it was actually watching some of your videos. You have this series, correct me if I get the name wrong, but it's Things I Thought Everyone Thought Until I Came Out as a Lesbian.
All women, yeah.
Yes, Things I Thought All Women. I was like watching those and I was like, I mean, all women do think those things. And then I would like watch more of those and I'm like, no, as you say that, I bet straight women don't think that. Particularly, I remember watching this one video of yours where you explained the basics of comp het, which I'm going to ask you to do here now as well. But one of the things that you said is separating the idea of wanting men to want me from actually wanting men. And it was this moment for me of like, oh my God, that makes all of these experiences where I like had this thing for a guy and then he had a thing for me and I would do what I told friends was panic bailing. They would want to date me and I would be like, I suddenly don't have feelings for them anymore. And I would like want to get out of that and be like, it's just the wrong guy. I dated a lot of men. Turns out that may have been the problem. About 2 years ago, I stopped dating because something wasn't working. There was a lot of unpacking of all of these things. And the last realization was that I wasn't attracted to men. Like it was all these other things that I needed to unpack first. So I think we had different experiences, but then a lot of overlap and a lot of similarity in those. Explaining what comp het is.
So comp het is pretty like complicated in the sense of like it's so intertwined in our lives that we don't even realize it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at systemic racism, like it's the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like it's so ingrained in what we do, we don't even realize it's happening. Comp het is basically the idea that like you're born defaulted to straight. And so all of your experiences and all of your thoughts and all of your whatever, you just think are normal because you assume that you're straight.
Yeah.
And so this idea that like, because I'm straight and I think that women are attractive, all straight women must think that women are attractive. That must be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea that it basically makes you explain away signs that should have told you you were gay or that should have told you that you were into women. It's just this whole unraveling thing, right? So I recently started a series on TikTok. Are you actually into men or is it just comp het? This is kind of the idea of unraveling some of these more specific key points. Like, you know, you have successfully dated women in the past or men in the past. And, you know, how is that possible if you like women? And it's this idea of like, did I successfully date men in the past or did I just want the attention and the attention, that comes along with men? And I think that's just, you know, a normal human thing is wanting attention. And so a lot of this comp het circles back around to you just want to be loved and you just want attention and you just want to feel like you belong. And so you explain away a lot of these really obvious signs, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think it's so similar. One of the things I've been saying a lot to people recently is up until the last couple of years, I've been checking off boxes on a list I didn't write. Like my desire to be what I thought a good person was so affected by this list of things that have nothing to do with being a good person, that have nothing to do with making yourself happy. And really the majority of people around me, like so I started a gay straight alliance when I was in high school. A friend of mine was bi and she wanted to start one, and I have a lot of like management and logistics skills. So that was my justification for why I was helping her out. I was a huge ally, really big supporter. People who were lucky enough to be gay should get to get married. Like that was my attitude about it. And so because of that, I came out as straight a lot. Like I told people all the time, I'm the straight of the gay straight alliance. Like, and I have this little list that I've been writing that I find so funny of, because I was 15 when I did that. That was the last time I like really questioned my sexuality. I did not understand a lot of things about myself when I was 15, but I felt like the narrative around being gay and coming out, I think particularly I think we're about the same age. I really hope this is something that does not resonate for people who are 5, 10, 15 years younger than us. Like, I hope that it doesn't sound true to them that these things are really real. But the narrative around what it was to be gay when we were in high school, you always knew. So being in the closet was about knowing you were gay and hiding that from people. I did not know. And so I didn't understand what attraction really was. I didn't understand all these different types of desire. So the fact that I like questioned that at 15 and then went, this is exactly what you're describing of like, so I'm straight because that's what most people are and that's quote unquote normal. And so the feelings that I'm having about men are attraction. And so that's what this is. And so that's how you know it's attraction. And those are not the feelings I have towards women. So I'm not gay. And then I thought about it one time when I was 15. And then 13 years later, I thought about it again and went, oops.
I think I drew the wrong conclusion here.
Yeah. 15-year-olds shouldn't get to make decisions for the rest of your life, even if that decision is deciding you're straight. And I don't mean that to invalidate anyone who is 15 and is going, I'm definitely gay or I'm definitely straight. Like, there's more flexibility in that than we allow for. Knowing that that's kind of that compet stuff, what were some of the ways that once you started dating women, did you immediately go, yep, absolutely, it's only women for me? Or what did that process really look like?
Some people's experiences are that they know that they're gay and they hide in the closet, right? Mm-hmm. That was my fiance's experience. My experience was genuinely that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I was very not afraid of having rumors of like dating my best friend in high school mm-hmm. or like of kissing girls at parties. And like, I just was very unafraid of the repercussions of that because I thought I was straight. Mm-hmm. And so when I finally went on a date with a woman, like I realized that this is not the same as like twiddling through life and like mm-hmm. thinking that you're straight and like just, acting on these impulses. Like this is real. And I was really scared at first. Mm-hmm. And so I changed my Tinder settings to men and women and I started matching with women and I got really scared. Now, first of all, Tinder sometimes really sucks because there are people looking for unicorns and thirds and all of that. Mm-hmm. And that was way too intimidating. I had never even been on a date with a woman, much less being a third or a unicorn or something. I was like, oh, no. And so I changed my Tinder settings back to just men. And I'm starting swiping through these men. And I met up with a couple men and I had this really uncomfortable experience with this guy. And after that, I was like, I'm done. No, I'm done. I was like, I'm just going to let this happen organically. And so I went out to this gay bar with a friend of mine and we're watching the drag show. Like I'm literally just there to like support the drag show or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like still thinking I'm like bisexual or straight or something. Like there's no way that I don't like men. Mm-hmm. So we go to this drag show and I see this girl there across the bar and I'm like, I need to know her. And I'm too scared to go talk to her. I'm too scared to do anything. And so we leave the drag bar and she had been hanging out with a drag queen. And I was like, well, I know the drag queen's name. So I go onto Instagram and I start looking through Instagram for the drag queen. Because if I can find the drag queen, then I can probably find her. And so it's 3:00 in the morning. I'm sitting in the parking lot behind the bar and I find this girl. It took me like 45 minutes, but I found this girl on Instagram and I hit follow. And the next morning I wake up and I have a message from her and she goes, "You were at the bar last night, weren't you?" And I was like, "Oh no." No, no. She goes, "Do you want to hang out today?" And I was like, "Seriously?" She's like, yeah. Do you want to hang out today? And I was like, "Okay, whatever." We hang out all day. We end up going to the bar. She kisses me in the bathroom of the lesbian bar in downtown Dallas. It's called Sue Ellen's. And we go to the bathroom. She kisses me in the bathroom. And I was like, oh no, this is very different than kissing my straight friends. Mm-hmm. This is very different. I'm nervous. I'm scared, but I'm excited. And for the first time, I always thought that the anxiety in my stomach was butterflies with men. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, because that was the first time I had ever experienced butterflies in my stomach. We ended up, that didn't really go very far, but it was about a month later was the first time I actually ever slept with a girl. And that was when I realized I woke up the next morning and I said, no, never again will I ever be with a man. And I went on Tinder and I changed my settings to just girls. And I never, ever, ever dated a man ever again. And it's very eye-opening when you finally allow those thoughts to creep in and you finally see all the things that everybody else saw.
I think this is where I mean, like, our experiences were bizarre. Like, our thought processes were really similar, but our actual experiences were really different. I was very inexperienced. I didn't kiss anyone until I was 19. Like, I didn't experiment with girls. I literally, just to like out myself as like really like inexperienced, I've literally never kissed a girl still. And I've had a lot of people since I've come out be like, how do you know? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you the details of how I'm specifically attracted to people. Like, that's like way too intimate of a question. Just trust that I'm sure. Like, just trust that I'm very sure. But it was, for me, I would like make out with guys and like not really care that much. Like, I went on like a lot of dates with guys, and I had an experience, which I probably will put like a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode, but I was assaulted when I was 20, like when I was out trying to like experiment more. So I assumed that my like almost panic attack levels when I was dating guys and like we were getting intimate was because of that. And unfortunately, a reality of the society we live in is I had more female friends that I could talk to who had the experience of being assaulted than I did who had the experience of realizing that they were gay or being gay. So I would talk to those women and they were like, it's just power through, unfortunately, which may not be bad advice. I don't know. I don't know what the right advice for people in that situation is, but it was not the right advice for me. So I just always assumed that my like nervousness and desire for men to want me was what it was like to be attracted to someone. And then my like extreme nervousness or like almost panic attacks that I would have were because of this other issue and that I needed to deal with that other issue. And one of the other weird things is like I talked to therapists about that and none of them asked if I was sure I was attracted to men and provided any resources around what that would look like and how you would look into that. That's also a really hard thing, is there's a lot of things around just not having anybody until I downloaded TikTok, and suddenly TikTok found out I was a lesbian way before I did. TikTok was like, you are a lesbian. You keep watching these videos of lesbians explaining what it is to be a lesbian. You definitely are one. I just think that idea of like what those different kinds of attractions are. I think you may have been, it for sure was on TikTok, but I think you may have been the first one to list off the different ways that we're attracted to people and how, particularly as women, I think it's a different experience in the way we're socialized around desire and sex that allows us to be more confused by those different types of attraction. So I don't do a good job of explaining them at all. I have tried to explain them to friends recently. It's not worked out. So I would love for you to explain the different types of attraction and how people can kind of get confused with those.
There's, I think, 8. I don't know if I'll remember them all off the top of my head, but there's platonic, romantic, aesthetic, there's skill-based, there is sensual, there is sexual, Oh man, I'm on a roll. Oh, intellectual and emotional. These eight different kinds of attraction. It's really easy to confuse attraction, right? And I'll give you an example because now that I'm aware of the different types of attraction and now that I'm aware that I'm a lesbian, it's a lot easier for me to point stuff out. I have this friend and he is a very attractive man. I'm very well aware that he had a crush on me. Like we've formed a friendship ever since. When I met him and I started interacting with him and like, okay, so he lives in Europe. So when we had been talking over the internet for a while, and then when I finally met him in person, we had this like instant connection, like very, very deep level emotional connection. If I didn't know about these 8 different kinds of attraction, I would have thought that I was sexually connected or romantically connected because that's just what you automatically assume.
Mm-hmm.
It's now that I know these different kinds of attraction, like I know that if I can literally take myself out of a situation where I'm feeling a lot of emotions and I'm feeling really connected and like I'm just very energy sensitive. And if I take myself out of my body and I look at the situation and I literally picture, you know, what would a sexual encounter with this person look like? And I can't picture, you know, certain body parts, or I can't picture anything other than a movement. Like I know what it looks like because I've done it before, but like I can't actually picture it and feel excited about it. I know that it's not sexual connection, right? So if I look back, we have a very, very strong platonic connection. We have a very strong emotional connection. We obviously have an aesthetic connection. He's a very attractive person. We have a sensual connection, like touching that's non-sexual, and all of that is very easily confused for romantic or sexual connection because you don't know the difference and you don't know how to, unless you know that the difference exists. And so this was also something that I had to realize when I came out, because I would meet girls and I would assume that since we're both gay, that we are if we have a connection, it's automatically romantic or sexual, which just wasn't the case. A lot of the girls that I dated when I first started dating women we were not compatible. Not at all. And I just assume, and instead of allowing a platonic friendship to grow and then seeing if we have a romantic and a sexual connection, it automatically jumped into a sexual connection that was frequently ruined because we weren't compatible. And I wasn't allowing myself those moments to look at the different ways that you could be attracted to somebody. So like, or like you could use the example of like a musician, right? Like if you look at a male musician or a male actor and you're like, wow, he's really attractive. Like, are you attracted to him sexually or are you attracted to his skills? These are different things that you can start to look at and start to kind of unravel within yourself to understand why you're feeling connected to people, not just, oh, I feel connected, it must be romantic.
There's so many things about that idea of like these different kinds of attraction. And I feel like women, something that I've heard before, although I don't have sources for it, so it could just be something that the internet said that sounded true. So I'm sorry if that's the case. That women are socialized to build emotional connections, including in romantic relationships, and men are socialized to build sexual connections with women. And so that's part of the reason why it is particularly difficult, the expectations that men and women have going into heterosexual relationships. And then that makes a lot of sense to me as to why I'm seeing all of these women now that we've been put in our houses for 2 years and had to just like, all we had time for was reflecting on ourselves to go, oh my God, that makes so much more sense. One thing that was incredibly helpful to me, although I am aware of some of the criticisms of it and some of the ways that it's flawed in that it only represents one experience, it happens to represent my experience, is I'm assuming you're aware of the Lesbian Master Doc. Yes. So I read that and all of a sudden went, oh my God, it addresses like all these stories that I had made up in my head about why I couldn't possibly be a lesbian. First of all, I thought you had to be really lucky to be a lesbian because only the luckiest of people are lesbians, which if you really and truly believe that, I have some great news for you.
You're a lucky one.
Yeah. I asked a friend of mine after I read that, have you like never wanted to be a lesbian? And she goes, no. I'm like, so like you've never like wanted to date women? She was like, no. And I was like, if I had known that, like if I had known that some women just don't ever, like it seems appealing to them in maybe like a platonic, it would be easier to date my friends because I already feel comfortable with them way, but not a like, no, I for real would love to date women way. I think it just would be so much easier. And and I think a lot of it too is there's very little lesbian representation in general in the media. And a lot of the representation of lesbians and women being attracted to other women is through the male gaze. So it is about men finding that attractive. And then the idea of men finding that attractive is also perpetuated in the idea all women kind of want to have sex with other women. Like that is an idea that exists in the media. We did not make that up on our own in isolation and just believed that, which made a lot of my feelings make more sense. And on top of that, I didn't look too closely at those feelings because of internalized homophobia. You mentioned, we talked a little bit about the idea of being in the closet. One of the things that I said to a few people right when I first came out is I'm like, I don't feel like I was in the closet because to be in the closet, you have to like know you're in there basically. And my recent thing has been, I was definitely in the closet. I just didn't realize it was a closet. And a few years ago, I turned on the lights and started looking around and trying to figure out what was going on here. And I saw a sign over a door that said out, and I walked out of it and I was like, oh my God, that was a closet? All the clothes make so much more sense now.
I love that.
Everything started clicking after I had that realization. But telling other people about this realization, because so much of my journey has been so internal. And then being able to talk to other people about it has been this weird combination of not a big deal and also a very big deal.
So everybody but me already knew, apparently, except for my dad. Like I said earlier, like I didn't, like you said, I didn't know I was in the closet. So I didn't know that like I had no fear around hiding my sexuality because I thought that I was straight.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are lots of little experiences that I've had along the way where my friends were kind of like, that's not very straight. Are you sure you're straight? But like they never said it to me. It kind of like I've just always been very bold in my statements, and I've always been very blunt and straightforward. And so I had no fear around talking about it, but I also didn't even realize there was a reason to have fear. When I moved to Texas and I told my friend that I was going to switch my Tinder settings to men and women, like I didn't think I was doing anything different. She just kind of was like, oh, okay, like let me know how that goes. And like nobody really questioned me. Or there had been an experience that I had with one of my friends. My friend, she's very straight, very, 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 very straight, but she has like a very strong masculine energy. And so at the time she had like the really short haircut and the, colored hair or whatever. She was just like presenting very masculine energy. I had a sex dream about her one night, and it had come up in a conversation or whatever. People were talking about different sex dreams or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I've had a sex dream about you. Everybody has. And she goes, they do? And everybody kind of looked at me in the room, and they just kind of like looked at me and they were like, okay. And she goes, that's interesting. That's cool. Like I'm flattered or whatever. And like the conversation went on, like nothing was addressed. And so when I finally actually, I think came out, I had been making little comments that it wasn't a surprise to anybody. And so I think the first person that I like officially came out to was my mom. And I called my mom and I said, because I had this experience after I left my ex where like all my emotions were shut off and I was very numb. And I had talked to her about it and I was like, I'm really scared. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, how do I turn these back on? She's like, it'll come. And so I called her one day and I said, Mom. And she goes, what? I said, my emotions are back on. And she goes, okay, like what happened? And I was like, I met this girl. And she goes, oh, okay, tell me about her. And I said, did you hear me? She goes, what? I said, did you hear me? I said, I met a girl. And she goes, yeah, Sydney, I've known you were gay since middle school. Okay, continue. And I was like, excuse me? That was rude. And it just has been normal ever since then. And she's allowed me to experience and like explore myself and all of that, and never questioned me along the way. I at first came out as bisexual until like I said, I slept with that first woman. And then I was like, no, no more men. My dad found out on Facebook and he thought that it was a marketing ploy to help me expand my business. He later found out that was not true. That was not a marketing ploy. But people like were so used to my commentary that when I finally came out, they were like, okay, finally. Like, I'm glad that you know what we've known for years. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Why didn't nobody tell me?
Also, just in case anybody's wondering, I am doing this for attention. I've been very unhappy for years for the attention. I've tried dating men and it didn't work out, and I'm just doing this now for attention. So just like to preempt anybody being like, Lillian, why are you doing this as a podcast? Is it for attention? It is. Absolutely. If that was your first thought, you nailed it. This was all a ploy. I thought I would do this because I just really want people to look at me and be like, wow, Lillian did it. And I did do it. I am one of the lucky few. So
we are the chosen ones.
Yes. Which was like, it literally didn't occur to me that straight people wouldn't want that.
Yeah, me either. No idea.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
So interestingly, I think because when I was in high school, I started that GSA and I was constantly super involved politically and like really active in that and a lot of other social justice movements. Like that wasn't the only thing I cared about. I was really loud about wanting people to be treated equally in every single way. So a lot of people asked me frequently, and because I thought about it one time when I was 15 for about 3 seconds, I definitely was straight. And so I told people I was straight all the time. And so most of the people that I've told so far, I've had kind of 2 reactions. So some of my friends for the last few years, I've been doing a lot of like, the Kinsey scale, I'm probably like a 1 or a 2 as opposed to a 0, which anybody who doesn't know the Kinsey scale, it's just around the idea of attraction being more fluid than we think of it. And a 0 is 100% attracted to the opposite gender, and 8 is 100% attracted to the same gender. I was really sure that it was just like these couple of celebrity exceptions. Turns out it's more the other way around. So that was interesting. So a couple of my friends, like that's how I came out to them. I was like, hey, you know how I've talked about that Kinsey scale thing? I did get that wrong. Oopsie. You
might be a 7 or an 8.
I didn't mean to, but I did get it wrong. My first friend that I came out to is the friend who I talked to about dating the most. Hilariously, her and her husband have this like the 2 extremes of what you want when you're dating. She is always everyone I meet is my soulmate. Everybody that I'm like talking to is obviously going to be in love with me tomorrow. Very, very pro, like Lillian's going to be in a relationship. So her reaction was, because I first said like, hey, I think I'm going to date women. Her reaction was literally to yell yay and to be like, because it opened up a whole other world of possibilities of people she could set me up with in her mind. Her husband, on the other hand, has been convinced that no one is good enough for me. And that like nobody treats me as good as I deserve to be treated, which is what you want when you're talking to friends. You want one friend who's like, this is the love of your life. And another friend who's like, your standards are not high enough. So she was the first person I came out to. She also was the only person who said I knew it, because she did know it. And she would ask me very casually every like 6 months to a year when I was really struggling with dating. She'd be like, and you're sure it's men you want to date? Like that's who you want to date? And I would be like, yeah, I thought about it one time. So I'm sure. Then I came out to some of my close friends who just like happened to be around. I want to be clear to anybody who's listening to this and this is how you're finding out. It's not a reflection of our closeness. It's a reflection of how often we see each other in person. Almost all of them have reacted with like, oh, cool. That's good to know. Like that doesn't not make sense, but also like it's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, I have this dual reaction of like, okay, so that's like it's not going to be stressful. It's not going to be a big deal. I don't have to do any sort of big announcement, but it is a big deal to me. Like that's the 2 reactions that I have internally. When I told most of my family, actually was just at a family wedding, which a lot of that was like, hey, how are things going? And I'm like, oh, I moved and I'm gay now and I have this new cool job. And it's equally important in the updates of my life. Because I got really used to that like casual way of just telling people and them accepting that and not having any issues with it, I did come out that way to my mom, and she was very surprised. It wasn't as like natural and easy to understand as it was for everybody else. So there were a few bumps along the road there. Pretty much worked out. We're good now, but it is just a little bit more complicated than it was. But for the most part, it's been a non-issue. I do want to talk a little bit, especially since it is National Coming Out Day, and this is what we're talking about today, around the idea of coming out at all, because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on it. And I'm curious, I think particularly since most people's reaction was like, you're not coming out to us, you're coming out to you. Like, what are kind of your feelings on the fact that queer people need to come out at all?
I think like in an ideal world, it would be amazing if like if sexuality was so fluid that like, you know, this time you're dating a guy, this time you're dating a girl, this time you're whatever, like if sexuality was just so fluid that it was so normal. And I think that like we might get there one day, probably not in our lifetime, but like in this space, in this world that we live in right now, I think that coming out can be really validating for people. By that, I mean, this ability for me to come out made me understand and love myself so much more than I did, because I grew up like with these little tendencies of like, why do I want to kiss women so bad? Like, why do I want to date my best friend? Like, why am I like this? And the ability to come out, because we don't live in a world that's, you know, sexually fluid, the ability to come out made me understand myself more. So if we lived in a world that was sexually fluid and you didn't have to come out and whatever, like you wouldn't probably have that deep ingrained misunderstanding for yourself, but it was something that I had. And so coming out for me was extremely validating, and it was extremely relieving, and it gave me permission for the first time in my life to love myself. That was what it was for me. And I know that it's not that experience for everybody. And I know that that's not the same experience everybody has. And I was blessed enough to have friends that supported me and family that backed me up. I talk about this all the time with my fiance, Holly. All of our parents are going to be at our wedding. And that is so rare in our community, and that breaks my heart. So like for those people, it hurts me that people have to come out, and it hurts me that this isn't normalized, and it hurt like all of that. But for me and my life experience and the way that I grew up and the way that society is in this moment, not in a perfect society, I needed it.
It's interesting because I think I relate to so many of the things you just said. I think a lot of people do. And I think about how much, I don't think anything has changed in perception and in the way people talk about it and feel about it as much in our lifetimes as this has. Like I know I mentioned this earlier, but I truly hope that some teenager who listens to this is going, that is so bizarre that you had all of these things internalized because of society. Like that's so weird to me. And I hope that that continues to be the case, because because I'm very cool. I was in a shuffleboard league. I had a boss who's no longer my boss, but still a very close friend. I joined the shuffleboard league that turned out to be mostly queer men and a few women who were all between 10 and like 20 years older than me, which I just highly recommend having friends who are quite a bit older than you. It is one of the best things because they just, when I would talk to them about things and I would be feeling really anxious about things, there was a lot of like, it's whatever it is, it's going to be fine. Like you just take a breath. There's so many things will get fixed with time and all of those things. But I also had these examples of knowing how, despite this little kind of hiccup with my mom and some of the other things that I've had to deal with internally, how incredibly lucky I am to be able to just kind of say this and have it not be a big deal with most of the people in my life. Because two of my friends who are that like 10, 20 years older than me, when we went out to dinner one night, we went to happy hour. It was me and a few couples. And they were talking about their coming out experiences. And a couple of them were like non-issues. But two of the people in that group were bonding over the fact that they both had their parents beat the shit out of them and kick them out of their house when they were teenagers. And that was like 10 years before I was a teenager. And the fact that that has changed so much and what it means to come out has changed so much. I hope that one day it doesn't matter. Like, I hope that one day you don't have to come out, or you have to come out as straight, or people just sort of like are constantly getting updates on what your label is and what fits best for you. But as of right now, I think the two things that I think about on a day like today with National Coming Out Day is, one, how important it is not only for individual people to come out and have that validating experience like you talked about, but how important it is for other people that you come out. Because, and I'm going to get a little emotional here, if other women didn't share this experience, like if I didn't have the videos that you made, I would never have known. Like it was other people coming out and sharing their stories that allowed me to figure this out about myself. And so I just think that it's so important that people with all different experiences and representing all the different ways that people can go through this process are able to share those stories. And we can see all of that. And the best way to have that happen right now is for individual people to come out and share their experience and what that was like for them. I hope that someday it becomes just as normal for someone to say, hey, I'm straight. And then 6 months later, hey, I'm going to date women. And then 6 months later be like, you know what? It turns out I'm definitely straight, or whatever it is. Like, I want it to not be a big deal, but it is now, and it matters. And it used to cost a lot more to come out. And it still currently costs things to come out. It takes a lot of emotional labor and a lot of work. Just the fact that the whole reason I decided to do this episode of the podcast, and I'm so happy to do it, and I'm so excited to be able to do it. But the reason I came up with the idea in the first place was I had this realization. I started the podcast, and on my first episode, my guest mentioned that they were queer. And I, with everything else in my life, immediately go to how do I relate to this? So when somebody talks about their mental health, I talk about my own experiences with that. When somebody talks about addiction, I talk about my family experience with that and what that was like. But when it came to being queer and my journey with queerness, I couldn't say that without outing myself. And I couldn't just casually reference that because people in my life would hear that and be hurt by the fact that they hadn't been told personally, and it would cause like drama in my family. Like it just would be a whole thing. And I wish it wasn't, but it is. So there's the societal coming out and all of those values. There's as an individual, I kind of wish I didn't have to, but then also the gratitude for how safe I am in doing it, both emotionally and physically. Lots and lots of feelings about coming out. And I'm sorry, I'm not really that sorry, but like that got heavier than I thought it would.
No, I love it.
Okay, I have a little list here that I think is kind of funny to lighten the mood a little bit. That when I was on my journey of realizing this, one of the things that I said out loud to someone was, I'm not a lesbian, but I think I'm culturally a lesbian, because there's a bunch of things that we associate with queerness that have absolutely nothing to do with actually being queer. And I just made a little list. Yes. And let me know which of these you relate to, or if there's other things you would put on this list for yourself. So things that apply to being a lesbian that are true of me. I love dogs. And so then I'm probably a lesbian. That makes sense. I don't wear makeup that often. I can't sit normally. This is one that apparently, I mentioned this to a couple straight friends and they did not know this, but it is like a thing online, at least, that queer people can't sit normally in a chair. They're always like tucking their feet up. And I do that. I love iced coffee. I'm a vegetarian. I wear a lot of like sporty sandals, so probably gay. And then this is one that takes a little bit of a journey. So I was on crew for the musicals in high school, which I feel is a very lesbian choice of me, because I was close to a very queer space of the theater. I was the one assembling sets, so I should have known. But a couple indicators that I'm straight in the queer communities, I do not keep my keys. What are those called? I don't even know.
Oh, the carabiners?
Carabiner. I don't keep my keys on a carabiner. I'm not into sports and my hair is kind of long. So those are 3 reasons I'm actually secretly straight and this is a phase.
I love it. I highly relate to the inability to sit properly. That is, I have moved at least 16 times in this session
Yes.
I have had colored hair over the years. So like my hair was blue, my hair was pink, my hair was purple. That definitely means that I'm gay.
Yeah.
The way that I eat, like I kind of hunch over and like, yeah, like that's definitely gay. The way I hold my drinks, like I hold my drinks like this at the top, definitely gay. The way I hold my steering wheel with my like little, fingers in the hole, that's definitely gay.
Super gay. You should have known.
I should have known, but I have long hair and I wear eyelashes,
so maybe it is a phase. Like that's the thing that you can just never know. But like that was genuinely, I actually one morning was in line at Starbucks getting an iced coffee and went, I love iced coffee so much. I'm probably a lesbian. And my friend, and I just went like, what the hell was that? Like, and I joke with some of my friends that I have a box in my head that was labeled, don't look in this, like, don't think about this. And it was a box that I opened recently and started going, okay, so it was obvious. And I did know, I just put it in this little box of like, don't think too hard about that one. Let me explain it away some real complex logic. And that was for sure one of like, every time there was something that associated me more closely with queerness, I would be like, this is definitely because I'm queer. And I'd be like, what do you mean? Internally. If you have a list of things like that in your head that are like, these are queer things that I do that are just culturally queer, I would recommend maybe checking out some of Sydney's videos and see how many of those you relate to. One of the other things you have talked about a lot is a lot of those ideas of like the things that you thought everybody thought. And I think so many of those, you frame it with this wonderful humor that I also like seriously relate to, because this idea of like, I can't believe I thought this and thought I was straight, but I explained it away by assuming everybody thought that.
Things that I thought all women thought before I came out. Part one. No, I'm kidding. One of the ones was that I had this exceptionally close relationship with my best friend. Like we would spend all this time together. There was at least 100 photos of us kissing on Facebook. We literally convinced our high school that we were in a relationship, even though I had a boyfriend. That's very, very, very gay. I didn't know though. Ruby Rose was like an obsession. And I know that there's like a lot of women that are obsessed with her, but I watched now this is a trigger warning about the music video shows overdosing, but I watched the Veronica's music video with Ruby Rose 100 times. 100 times. And I didn't think that I was gay. Also, like during sex with men, like I would think about women, or I would like picture it was a woman, and like I didn't think that was gay, and just so many obvious signs that now I'm looking back and I'm like, how did you not know?
Something that I've done recently is rewatch from my childhood, and I watched Xenon. Did you ever watch Xenon from the Disney Channel?
Yes.
I really thought I had a crush on that guy. I did not have a crush on him. Did have a crush in that movie though. And then another one that I rewatched recently was, did you watch Bend It Like Beckham?
No.
Oh my God. It's the queerest movie of all time. I like watched it and I was like, that man is a lesbian. And I watched that movie over and over and over again. The next one on my list is Stick It. Did you watch that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't know why I loved that movie so much, but I watched it a lot. I know now. I know why I love that movie so much now. There's a lot of things like that in pop culture that I look back on. I definitely did think a lot of my crushes when I was a kid were because I wanted to be them and not because I definitely had a huge crush on them.
Yeah, mine for me was Jasmine from Aladdin.
So many great things when I look back. It's sort of fun. It's both bizarre and fun to like look back at things from when I was a little teen and be like, oh my God, that makes so much more sense now as an adult, knowing what I know now. But one of the other things that I've seen recently, have you watched A League of Their Own on Amazon Prime yet?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God, it's spectacular. Very, very queer. A League of Their Own does not have a coming out story. It has a coming in story. And it's this idea of being welcomed into the queer community and kind of finding those people and finding that space. And I think that really put a name to what I have sort of realized was part of the experience that I've had. I've always been more comfortable in queer spaces than in straight spaces. Didn't know why. I now know why. And there's lots of things like finding your videos, finding other people on TikTok that have similar things, which I'm going to put a lot of links in the description of this podcast for those as well. Advice that I saw on a video on TikTok: can start consuming a lot of queer content. And there's another podcast called Two Dykes with a Mic that I listened to. And I listened to the end of that, and their little sign-off phrase is, "Do something gay today." And I cried because I felt like this hug of, you are in this community and you're part of this group of people, in a way that I had only ever really felt the opposite of that, because I felt like my connection with queerness was fake and for attention. As we've already established, it definitely is. And then I didn't feel comfortable in straight spaces either. Coming out and realizing that has led to this much larger bridge of connection.
Yeah, so when I moved to Dallas, I didn't even realize that there was like such a queer community here. You think like Texas is going to be not that. I actually, when I moved across the country, I was deciding between 3 different cities. I was either going to go to Arizona. I didn't know what city, but I was going to go to Arizona, either Dallas or Nashville. And I was like, I don't know which one I'm going to go to, blah, blah, blah. And the heat won out in Dallas, and that I had a friend here already. And so I moved here, and then I started to explore my sexuality, and I was like, I don't know if this is like okay here. Like, do I need to move somewhere? Like, what am I going to do? And I discovered the Gayborhood in Dallas. And there is just a strip in Dallas that has rainbow crosswalks and all these gay bars. And there's like a gay country bar, and there's a lesbian bar, and there's rave bar, like a gay rave bar where they have like drag shows upstairs. And I remember going down there for the first time, and it was before I even like really had come out, before I even realized that I was gay. And I just kind of went down there to check it out. I don't know, like just check it out, I guess. And I walked in, and even some gay bars like that are made for men, they don't really like lesbians. Whatever, there's riff in our community, it's fine. And so I walked into this bar, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And it was like really empty. And then this drag show started, and they pulled me up on stage and were like, dancing on me and singing on me. And I'm literally standing there like so uncomfortable. And the drag queen looks at me and goes, "You're okay, sweetie. Like, it's going to be okay. You're welcome here." And I was like, oh. We started going to the Gayborhood every single weekend after that, because it's where I wanted to be. It's where I felt safe. It's where I felt comfortable. It's where I felt everything. And, even despite the fact that areas like that attract, unfortunately, very violent people, as far as, if you think about like the shooting in Orlando and at the gay bar and stuff, like areas like that tend to attract people that don't appreciate us. It still is one of the safest places I feel ever. And, I love Pride. I love all of it. And so that was, it was really validating to come into a community, especially when I was invalidating myself, in the sense of, I thought that I was only trying bigger quotes, trying to be a lesbian for attention or for male validation, or, because I thought I was special. Nobody ever made me feel that way except for myself. And so that was like the best thing about this community. I love this community so much. It kind of reminds me, I grew up like in the rave community. I'm an addict. I've been in recovery for 6 years, and I grew up in the rave community, and the rave community is very like, well, if you've never been in the rave community, you don't know this, but plur, it's like peace, love, unity, and respect. It's the type of community where like we're in this big mosh pit, and like some stranger goes out and braves out and grabs 6 bottles of water and shares it with the 25 people next to us, so that like nobody passes out or whatever. Like, that's the community I grew up in. And so it was really hard for me to leave that community when I got clean. And then I stepped into the LGBTQ plus community and was welcomed the same way I was in that community. And so it's been a nice transition for me to be able to be in this space. And not that the queer community is sober, but it's not the same triggering experience as being in the rave community, if that makes sense.
There still is some of that, in the same way that like you're never going to find a space where everybody in that space is perfect, because unfortunately we're all still human beings. I think there is always that level of like, you're going to find those additional layers of sexism and racism and this is what it is to be queer. And therefore, if you don't fit these standards, then you're not in the community. I find that to be really rare in my experiences. Maybe I'm just really lucky. It is this very welcoming space. And I think now, even more than I've seen in the past, it's welcoming to people who are like unsure. When I came out to my little brother, he's just in general one of the most understanding humans on earth. And the first thing that he said to me, because when I first started coming out to people, I wasn't saying I'm queer, I wasn't saying I'm a lesbian, I wasn't using any of those labels, which makes it harder to express to people. So I just started telling people I'm going to date women. And I told my little brother, I was like, I'm going to date women. I don't have a new label. I really don't know what it is yet. And he goes, you never have to figure that out. Like, you don't have to have a label, because that's not about you. That's for other people. Like, the way I was talking about it was like it was for other people. If that's helpful to you, that's wonderful and lovely. But the freedom of not feeling like I had to pick a label, because it felt like I was somehow wrong for saying that I was a lesbian because I wasn't 100% sure that I was never going to be attracted to a man again. And there was a huge freedom of instead choosing to identify as queer. And I think that queer is the label that I feel the most comfortable with. There could be a lot of reasons for that. That could include internalized homophobia, but that's the one I'm most comfortable with. Lesbian and pansexual are probably not wrong ways to describe me. Even that idea of like, I don't have a really strong identity as one of these particular labels used to not be okay. Like, the biggest argument when we were in high school about queerness was, are gay people real or is it a choice? Like that, it's unbelievable to me how much there are absolutely still people who think that, but that is not the conversation anymore. That is like not a mainstream conversation anymore. And that is really freeing. But I think that the having to be certain and having to fight for the fact that you existed really affected my feeling of I needed to be certain before I told anyone, because if I wasn't sure, I was definitely doing it for attention, and I was being a bad ally, and I was taking away from the queer community. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen, but I don't think it happens nearly as often as I was led to believe it happens. Validity and even questioning. Like, there's validity in being somebody who's like, I am not sure, but I want this community support while I figure this out. And I think there's a welcome even for people who are in that position. Well, I think we need something really happy. And I think if I can think about the happiest thing we could talk about, it would be your love story. So tell me how you met your fiance, who in however many days, 4 days after this podcast comes out, will be your wife.
So weird. It's so weird. Oh God. Okay. I never thought that I was going to get married. When I dated men, I always like pictured the day that somebody would propose to me. And I was like, how do you like say yes and like know that that's what you want forever? And then I realized it was because it was men. I couldn't figure it out. But Holly and I met in November of 2019. So right before the pandemic. And I had come out in June of 2019. Yeah. I had come out in June. I had dated, I don't know, four women in between that time, and all of them had ended tragically. The last two women that I had dated right before Holly had actually left me for their exes. Very typical lesbian move. So I was a little heartbroken, and I was a little broken, and I wasn't exactly healed from my emotionally traumatizing relationship yet. So I was just kind of done. I said, I'm going to get on Tinder. I'm going to go be a hoe, because like I'm trying to be a hoe. So I got on Tinder. I opened Tinder back up, and I guess like before I had matched with the last girl that I dated, I had swiped yes on Holly. So when I opened my Tinder back up, it had said, you've matched with this person. And I was like, whatever. So I like got on her Instagram. I followed her on Instagram, and she said she remembers when I followed her on Instagram because she was at the gym with her best friend. And she looks at her best friend and she goes, oh my God, look at this girl that just followed me. And her best friend's like, you have to talk to her. You have to talk to her. Holly's like freaking out at the gym or whatever. And so then we ended up talking on Tinder for a little while. We went on she was home for Thanksgiving. It was like right at Thanksgiving time. So she went home for Thanksgiving, and then I was about to go drive back to Maryland for 2 weeks. And so I was like, if you want to meet me, like you need to do it now, we need to do it
Mhm.
now. And she's like, okay, so I'll take you out on a date. So we go out on our first date, and I literally thought she hated me. I am like sitting at this table. I'm like, what the hell is going on right now? Like, she has got this like wall that she puts up with new people that she meets. I thought she hated me. She's mean mugging me. She's being so sassy. She's got that like sarcastic, flirty, whatever.
Mhm.
And I'm like, she hates me. Okay, whatever. And so she walks me back to my car and she kisses me. And I was like, I'm very confused. Like, I'm very confused. And so whatever, we like leave there, and within 5 minutes, now mind you, she lives 30 minutes from where the date was. Within 5 minutes, she's texting me and she's like, let me know when you get home. Like, I'm so happy that we got to go out tonight. And I'm like, I'm doubly confused. I don't understand what's happening. And so I just kind of like, I don't know. It was the first time in my life that I had met somebody and I just like allowed it to happen.
Mhm.
I am kind of like your friend in the sense of like, everybody is my soulmate. I fall very fast, fall very hard, and I had gotten my heart broken a few times. And so this was the first time that I was like very standoffish. I was like, you know, if you want to talk to me, you can message me first. And it worked. So I went home for 2 weeks, and it's a 20-hour drive to Maryland. And so when I was about to come back, I called her and I said, will you get on a flight and meet me in Nashville? And she was like, what? And I said, Nashville's halfway. Like, I'm going to stay the night in Nashville. Like, I'll drive to Nashville. You fly to Nashville, meet me there, and then we'll drive back to Texas together. And she's like, you're crazy. I'm like, okay, maybe, but like, will you do it? And it took her like 3 days. And finally she calls me and she goes, I'm coming to Nashville. And I was like, okay. And so she came to Nashville, and that trip basically, like, we were inseparable after that. I mean, it was either going to be the best thing that happened or a really great story.
Mhm.
And it ended up being the best thing that happened. We were completely inseparable after that. And then, you know, the rest is kind of history. So we've been together for 2.5 years now. We've had, of course, our ups and downs through that. And it's been so different to be with somebody that like wants to openly communicate, and like when I have an issue is open to like, what solutions can we come up with? How can I fix this? How can I make you feel better? How can I whatever? And so like the first issue that we had in our relationship, I actually tried to break up with her.
Mhm.
We had we had an issue where we had gotten too deep into the relationship, and I was feeling like suffocated, and I really wanted to kind of explore a little bit of my independence now that I was like healing out of this toxic relationship that I've been in. I wanted to explore a little bit of my independence, and I didn't know how to ask for that and actually receive it. So I tried to break up with her. And she literally was like, you're a psycho. Can we just like talk about this? I was like, what do you mean talk about this? And she's like, what do you need? And I said, I think I need some time. So we like didn't see each other for like 10 days. We lived in the same apartment complex. We didn't see each other for like 10 days. And then she took me out on our second first date. And I think that's when our relationship really started, was our second first date, because that was when we really like were intentional with our relationship. And we learned how to communicate, and we learned how to do all these things. And it's like, it's so hard to learn those things after you've been in such a toxic situation. But anyway, last November she proposed, and now we're getting married in 4 days.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so amazing. That's so wonderful. And just so the listeners know that I didn't make you record this podcast 4 days before your wedding. This is a couple of weeks before that, guys.
She's not that mean.
I'm a different kind of mean. So for people who are listening to this and maybe a few things are resonating for them and they're reacting how I sort of reacted, which is like, ooh, scary. I've intentionally not looked at that subconsciously for years. What are some of those like first, like, hey, I'm just thinking about exploring this, or how do I know that these feelings are real versus some form of trauma or anything like that? What are some piece of advice you have?
I was going to continue to question my sexuality until I allowed myself to explore it. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of, is allowing themselves to explore it. And so you can do that by dipping your toes in. Something as simple as like, if you're as changing your Tinder settings to women, and just like kind of exploring that and seeing how that makes you feel, and seeing how all of that, like, I think growing up, in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to be with women, but I was just kind of waiting. I like explained this in a TikTok one time. I was like waiting for like some queer angel to like fall into my lap and kiss me.
Yeah.
And like, or like make the move or like try to be whatever. And that just doesn't happen. Like you have to take your own journey and you have to be in charge of it. And you have to be the conductor in this situation and put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable, and allow yourself to say like, does this feel good or does this not feel good? Or like, do I want to explore this further or does this not make me feel good? And for me, I was a psychology major in college. And so psychology really helps me understand things. And so learning things like comp het, and learning things like the different types of attraction and things like that really helped me because I understood why I acted the way that I acted. Because before I understood those things, it was really easy for me to dismiss myself or invalidate myself because, oh, well, you dated men before, like, what do you mean you're gay? Or, you know, how can you possibly be gay if you did this, this, and this? And when you understand the psychology and honestly the sociology as well, right? So like sociology is the social construct of things. When you understand those things, it can be easier to unravel them and to see where like society pigeonholed you into a space or didn't, right? So like maybe some people are questioning and they're not,
Yeah.
and they're just kind of, you know, whatever. But and either way, it's fine. My biggest thing the biggest advice that I can give is if you decide to go the route of exploring while involving other people, make sure that you tell people that. And so that was something that I was very, very cognizant of when I started dating women was like, hey, I'm really new to the community. Hey, I've never done this before. Hey, like you know, every girl that I match with, I'm like, dude, I just came out. Like I literally just came out. And so if they wanted to be involved in that, they were given the option rather than me. You know, a lot of newer lesbians get this bad rep, or like they get the rep of like the straight girl that wants attention or wants to explore or whatever because they're not honest. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you choose to involve other people in your journey, just over communicate and allow people the option to decide to be involved or not be involved. I think that was the biggest thing that I did that I was really proud of during my journey.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that you mentioned in there that really resonated is one, being super honest with people, because then they can choose how much they want to be involved in that and not. And you're going to probably get the people that you would prefer to interact with anyway, who are going to be able to help you answer those questions and hopefully make you feel really safe in doing that. And the idea that like, you could be like, you can question and the answer be you're straight. Like that could be true. Or any of these other identities that we've referenced. Like that is a journey to figure that out for yourself. And honestly, I think as women, we are so often discouraged from understanding and exploring our sexuality regardless of orientation, like regardless of who you're attracted to. Women are taught to not understand what they're attracted to and why and all those things. So I think even if you're like, I'm very sure I'm straight, it's still worth learning about the different kinds of attraction. Like it's still worth understanding what comp het is and why sometimes you're attracted to men who the only reason you're attracted to them is because you want them to want you. Like there's ways that can happen even if you don't at the end of that come to the conclusion that Sydney I came to, which was, oops, it was actually women the whole time. So you can come to lots of different conclusions from that. And it can feel scary to even think about it. But let me tell you, the first and biggest and most consistent feeling I've had is relief and joy and freedom. Like that is the biggest feeling that I have had. And I didn't know how much of the other trapped feelings I had until I really went, oh my God, this is what it's been the whole time. So it's scary to look at, but just look at it. It's fine. Whatever happens out of that, it's going to be okay. And it's probably going to be really good. Well, I'm sure everybody, because I've referenced a bunch of your videos and they're amazing, is dying to find you on the internet. So how can people in the least stalkerish way or just only friendly stalking, find you on the internet?
I'm the real Queen Sid everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my podcast, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. Most of the queer stuff is on TikTok, so it's the real Queen Sid, and you'll be able to find me anywhere if you search that.
As always, all those links will be in the description for this episode, so you can go find those really easily there. Thank you so much, Sydney, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to be a part of this. This is really cool and it's an honor to be a part of this, specifically this episode with you. So thank you.
Well, there's a bunch of other episodes you can listen to, and you can find all of those at Care So Much Pod. There's something that you're out there and you care a lot about it, and you can talk about it for hours, and you think that nobody else cares. Just know that I do. I care so much,